yeah, we're here, we're live, and we're going to talk about building mushroom beds. Where did this all start? When I moved back up here around 11 years ago, I really loved foraging for wild mushrooms. And it became apparent in the foraging cycle of the year that mushrooms, at least around here, are one of the most abundant food sources where you just get a lot of stuff for very little work. So that really started me on thinking about that mushrooms are a key part of the local ecosystem. And I wanted to incorporate that into my gardens because my gardens are trying to mimic natural processes. And then Stefan was working on stuff talking about biobeds and talking about making sure all of that mycelium was growing everywhere. And I was starting to work on building wine cap mushroom beds. And my friend Honor was also working on this idea where she would take raw manure straight out of the coop, cover it with mulch, and plant squash in it. And squash did great in it, but other things couldn't handle the nitrogen. And I slowly started to put all these things together that the garden bed needs mycelium to help balance all of the nutrients and stabilize all the water and make everything happy. And you can grow some things on raw nitrogen, raw chicken manure, but it kind of got too much. And there's this wine cap mushroom thing that just grows unbelievably and takes over everything. So I put all those together in making these wine cap mushroom biobeds. And we'll kind of talk about building that. We have a space to build one here. But essentially what it is you have a good manure on the bottom. I use chicken manure straight out of the coop because it kills everything below it. So I don't have to block out the weeds underneath. If you didn't use that, you could put cardboard or feed sacks or paper or something that'll decompose underneath to block everything out. Then you build your manure or compost or whatever that has lots of nitrogen. And then on top of that, you put mulch and mycelium sort of in layers. And the mycelium will regulate all of that too much nitrogen. It'll help hold the water, and it'll hold the whole thing together and make it really hard for weeds to get up through. So it's kind of my lazy, no-till garden that works really well. So I think the idea here is that we're going to actually work on building that out. Yeah, so the compost is already added. Thank you. That is the easy part now. So now we just have to start adding some wood chips and some mycelium, which I didn't grab out from inside. So could you grab that real quick?
Sure. Where is it? While
she grabs that stuff, Stefan, you helped get this thing started. Now I've got you roped into this.
Oh, okay.
I don't know, do you have any explanation of what the grand scheme of this agroecology center is?
Well, it kind of stands on three legs: research, demonstration, and education. We are in a very cold climate up here in very northeast Minnesota. So we have a short season between frost-free short season, and so trying to experiment with different varieties, trying to find as many different types of fruits and vegetables and fungi and seeds and anything that can really kind of grow up here. Especially as we found, the season kind of starts to change and the world warms. That's one of the things we're focusing on is experimenting with new varieties, but also at the same time demonstrating and showing what can a regenerative no-till landscape look like in the Northeast. So.
Awesome. Cool. So this is the wine cap mycelium that we get from Field and Forest. It's organic, comes with organic certification, which is great. They do really good stuff and they ship all over the country. Basically what we do is we break up the sawdust all on top of the compost on the beds, and then we break this up in between as we go, and we keep it watered, and it'll grow. So that's the first step. I actually have used pine shavings a lot too, and that works.
Okay.
If they don't mind pine at all, they go quick with it. It's similar to straw. Really anything. I've been building a wild rice hull bed with wine caps. So anything that was alive once can become wine caps now.
Yes.
So I'm just gonna shovel and put this around. kind of a thin layer on top of the compost first, just so that the mycelium has something to sit on. Absolutely, yeah. Mixing straw and wood chips or shavings is many different methods. Like Stefan was saying, it really loves straw, so that's a really good, like, mix that in right along the mycelium to give it a little bit of a boost.
So, will this bed not be used all year then?
Oh no, so that's the cool part, is it's not just for growing mushrooms. This is where we plant our plants in. So we're going to put a Three Sisters Bear Island flint corn, beans, and squash all in here, and the mushrooms will grow in between the plants.
And it's great for wine caps to be shaded. They can be in full sun, but if you want that nice, rich red color in the cap, the more shade they get, the richer the red.
Exactly.
The more sun they get, they tend to kind of brown and tan. And so you said this sawdust is mostly deciduous?
Yeah, it's all birch and maple.
Okay, all birch and maple.
And local.
And local, yep.
So it's a local waste product. That's really, when we're talking about figuring out resources and how to build permaculture farms, what type of resources do you have that's considered a waste right now? That's my main thing. I had chicken manure I needed to deal with, and I had a problem with weeds. So I had two problems, and I tried to work them together to make a solution. I actually take raw chicken manure right out of the coop because it's so high in nitrogen, and it kills off everything. So I can cover it. We could do this. This is a nice prepared garden, but we could go out in the middle of the yard and do the same thing, and the weeds wouldn't grow in if we used raw chicken manure.
Basically, it burns. Yeah. It's like a chemical burn because the ammonia is so high.
Exactly, yeah.
Yes. That's why typically when people use chicken manure, what they do is they'll compost it first, which gets rid of some of that ammonia, but there's still a lot of nitrogen. So turkey and chicken manure are known for having the highest nitrogens. Basically poultry manure.
And the issues I had with composting, I mean, it works well, but you're going to get weeds in it, you're going to get stuff growing in it, it shrinks a lot, and you lose a lot of oxidation. A lot of the carbon ends up going up. This way you're taking the manure and we're covering it right away so it doesn't have a chance to oxidize. I also am just too impatient to wait for the compost to be ready. I've got nitrogen, I need plants, let's just do it right now. And really cool thing here is there's drip line all in here on the bottom. So we can just turn that on and it's going right now. The water is soaking from the bottom. We'll have to probably put a sprinkler or hose it on the top, because in the beginning you really, really, really have to soak in the water and get everything wet. But what happens is once the mycelium gets going, it holds that. And moving forward, the best way to keep these going is every fall, before you put the garden away, you put a new layer of mulch on top. And then by the spring, it's completely colonized and it starts fruiting. I'm already completely overrun in at least the beds in my greenhouse that have been running since last spring, because I gave them a ton of mulch right in the fall because I was mulching. I actually had apple and pear grafts growing that I was keeping safe by mulching them up.
Saying that if you wanted to start a new bed that eventually was going to be a garden that was grass right now, you could do this, but you kind of have to have the chicken manure first to kill that grass underneath, or?
Yeah, if you weren't going to use chicken manure, what I would do is I'd put like cardboard or something down to make that barrier. That is not my favorite thing because it kind of disconnects from the soil and it can cause, like, water doesn't like to move through them very well and stuff, so it can cause some issues. But I've done that. I actually did that one area. I was building a bed where wild raspberries are growing, and if you've ever gardened around wild raspberries, they're just impossible to get rid of. Oh, thank you. And I put cardboard down, actually I think it was paper feed bags down, and then did chicken manure and built the biobed on top of it, and that was 4 years ago, and I haven't seen a raspberry plant yet. So it'll stop whatever is growing underneath it, especially if you use that raw manure. But if you don't, a weed barrier will work. And as long as you keep mulching it each fall, you'll keep the weeds back.
And what are you growing on top of it?
We can grow, so if we weren't doing the wine cap and we were just building these with raw chicken manure and mulch, then I would say you really only want to grow like squashes or stuff like that, because like brassicas, like say broccoli, if you try to grow broccoli on soil that has too much nitrogen, it ends up making beautiful giant leaves and it never makes the head of broccoli. Mm-hmm. So I wouldn't do that without the mushrooms. But once we add the mycelium in, brassicas, this is their favorite thing. So I've not found a problem with growing anything in these beds. And I even do it for perennials and like apple trees and fruit bushes and stuff like that. And they love it because it just is a perfect start for them. And it gives them a head start too.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons that a lot of people talk about with perennial fruit trees is always putting down fresh wood chips so that every year you're feeding the fungal life.
Yeah.
And for some of that can be the wine cap mushrooms, but it's also any of the the saprophytic or mycorrhizal fungi that are living in the soil. It's really important to just keep adding that mulch layer. And if you have a great local resource like somebody making firewood, mm-hmm. you have a perpetual source of wood shavings.
And if if you are in a city, if you're in a city and you want to do this, your neighbors, not that they should, but a lot of them probably rake up the leaves every fall. Leaves are one of the perfect mediums for this. I would highly recommend that. Mm-hmm. Or if people rake up grass clippings, that would work too. A lot of times you can find people throwing away the resources that you need. So,
would this be good with the Google culture thing? We filled some of these beds and we ended up with big ruts.
yes.
Needing to fill these ruts, so it's like, oh, well, I'm just putting all, but I'm trying to figure out for filling.
Exactly.
Maybe it should be a combination of the straw and this.
This is absolutely what I do with biobeds, because then it breaks it all down faster too, because wine caps will break down that wood so quick. And if you fill in those cracks as much as you can with the sawdust too, and get it inoculated in there, that's a great plan. And if you put like a layer of compost or manure on there after the sawdust and build a biobed on top of that, it'll hold the solid spot. So it might open up those spaces again the next year. You may have to fill in a little bit, but that's when you should be putting mulch on anyways. So we got the bottom layer of mulch down. This sort of gives it a little barrier between the compost or the manure or whatever. And what I'd do is I'd inoculate over this and then make sure we water everything before we start adding more mulch on, because it takes a while for the mulch to be saturated with water. And if we have enough, which I think we do, we can do multiple layers. I often do just one layer in between mulch, and that tends to work. But if you do more, it grows faster and it can be a little more robust. So this is the mycelium, and it's just sawdust spawn. And you can break it up a little bit and just spread it around. At home, I've been doing a half a package for a 16-foot square. That's probably a little light. I think I can make it work. But one package would be plenty. Like I said, though, you could do more. And the more you do, the better the chances of it taking are. And then, once it's established, you can just keep spreading it. So you can take some from an established garden and spread it into another one.
Yeah, my favorite thing to do is every time I harvest wine caps, I just, instead of cutting them, I just rip them up, and then at the base of them, they always have a little mat of mycelium. I just break that off and walk over different places and just tuck it in the garden.
Oh, no wonder they're all
They're everywhere.
That's great.
I help them spread.
And throughout the year.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they'll pretty much flush. They tend to flush the most in the spring and the fall. That's because it's a little cooler and it tends to be wetter.
Yeah.
But anytime there's a good rainstorm or it gets real wet, they'll flush again.
Yeah, I was reading the little info sheet. It says they'll likely flush if there's a temperature drop. I hadn't known that. That's pretty interesting. I mean, I've tried to figure out what all makes them go, because I always want them to show up in time for the market, you know, and if it's like more than 2 days before a market, it's kind of too much.
Yeah.
And, you know, they always flush like the day after the market.
Now, have you ever tried drying wine cap mushrooms? Is this a type that dries very well?
It does, it shrinks down a lot, and it depends on your taste. If you like the taste a lot, it concentrates it. I tend to find that it makes it a little too strong for me, okay. But that's just my personal take on it. My favorite way to do it is to saute them, butter and freeze them. Yep. And last year, Pam and I actually did a lot of experiments with doing pressure canning. And then they're just like canned mushrooms. That's a great option. That's probably my #1 option. And then you can put stuff like wild ramp salt or something. You can flavor them a little bit. Well, this is an extremely aggressive mushroom. So even if, and I know there are, different types of mycelium growing here right now, it'll colonize and beat them. But for most other mushrooms, you need to have a sterile substrate. So we would need to sterilize, boil, or use chemical sterilization to kill everything off first so that the mycelium we want to grow would establish. And I've done a little experimenting. Oysters are also very aggressive, and I've tried doing some of these beds with it, and it worked okay. I should try experimenting more. The mycelium grew well. I didn't get great flushes out of it, and then the neighboring wine cap mycelium colonized it by the next year. So I do think, though, that like oyster mushrooms could work if you just want the benefit of the mycelium, which is, I would say, more than half of the reason to do this. The robustness of the plants that happens when you plant things into this bed is, I have not found anything to compare. And these beds, it's just amazing. It doesn't matter what pH the soil is. It doesn't matter. You don't have to worry about soil tests. You're building a whole new topsoil here. So you don't have to. I've built these right under where pine trees had been. Doesn't matter. Even though it was ultra acidic, if I tried to plant something without this in it, it would have just died. This works just fine, perfectly. I've never seen anything else consistently make plants grow to their full genetic potential.
Take out some of the balsam fir that was dying.
Yeah.
And close to the house, so it's a fire hazard. And so now we've got kind of these stumps, and it looks like, I'm sure, very acidic.
Yeah.
You can't really see what's going to grow there that much because there was never much under there because there was no light really. So thinking that maybe something like this would be really good. Do you think it might even help break down the stumps, you think?
Absolutely. Rose, you got to come over sometime and see our farm. We've got a whole, a cattle panel square is 16 feet. So I have an area that's 5 cattle panel squares by 2 cattle panel squares. So it's a pretty big area. And all we did was cut down the dying balsam that were in there from the spruce budworm, left all the stumps. We actually pushed pigs through it. But then we built all of the biobeds on top of it, and yeah, works wonderfully. In fact, if you were having someone remove your balsam, and you could get them to chip it up, there's your sawdust right there. You could put whatever logs are left down as like a hugelkultur bed, and you could just like right there, it's everything you need. Put some compost underneath it, but you could just inoculate it. It won't grow as big of mushrooms and the plants wouldn't grow as well, but you could do that as a start. It's crazy because it does sort of front load the work a little bit. You know, this is where you have to do the work. You have to pile up the mulch, you have to get your compost in place, and it's all like right in the beginning when you're trying to plant stuff. But you can build these beds starting in the spring once it's done freezing, all the way into the fall. Give it a couple weeks before your frost hits. Even my parents did it after it started freezing and it worked. So if you do it in the spring, you'll get mushrooms the same year. If you do it in the fall, you'll start getting mushrooms the next summer. But the other thing I like about this is compost and wood chips are lighter and easier on your back than digging dirt up and soil up. It is labor. Yeah, it's labor, but it's not nearly as bad as if we had to sit here and pitchfork up this whole garden. And I suppose people have, mechanical tillers and stuff. I do pretty much everything by hand tools, partially because, the mechanical means are expensive. But also because a lot of our gardens are really not in very accessible places. It'd be really hard to get machines in most of the places.
Well, and it's kind of like no-till.
Exactly. Right, exactly. Yeah, this is no-till. So, and I guess maybe we should talk about why no-till. What's the point of that? The point is every time you disturb soil, it kills a bunch of the soil biology, and it also allows the carbon to oxidize. So all that carbon that's in the soil that will make the plants healthy, to make everything work right, ends up oxidizing and becoming CO2 and going up into the atmosphere where it's not helping anything. So this is a good way to not only keep that carbon you already have in your soil present, but we're putting a whole bunch more down, and this process will make it more likely that that carbon becomes stable soil carbon and just stays as a sink in your garden where it helps instead of in the atmosphere where it hurts.
How long when will you start putting the plants in? The plants
We can do that.
the seeds.
We can do that today. Once we're done with this part, we can start putting plants in. Yeah, because that's part of the magic of how this whole thing works. You do really want to make sure you know what a wine cap looks like and identify it correctly before you pick it out of your garden and eat it, because it's always possible that something else will grow. And actually, it's really likely when you first build it that you're going to see some flushes of other fungi, because fungi tends to flush when it's reached colonization of its whole medium. And the wine cap will start spreading, and any other mycelium that might be growing in these wood chips will feel that pressure, and they'll run out of room because the wine cap takes everything else, and the result to that is they'll flush, because then that'll let them send spores out, and hopefully they'll get somewhere where they can establish. So be careful not to just eat any mushroom that comes out of your bed. Make sure it's a wine cap, and they're very, very identifiable. There's nothing that looks like them.
One of the key identifying factors is, if you can see, they have what they call a skirt right along there, and that's from where the cap was attached to the stem, and then when it breaks, here, let me show you. We have a couple of them down here. So these are, you can see all of them. They all have that skirt right on the stem underneath there. That one's got it. So that one has it there too. Because the caps will look different. Sometimes they'll be tan, sometimes they'll be a dark brown, sometimes they'll be a beautiful red. Part of that has to do with how much sun exposure they're getting. They do tend to be a little bit redder, more a wine color if they're in a good shady environment. So and these were in full bright sun, so that's why they kind of look like that. And definitely, as you find them throughout the landscape where they're more shaded, you'll definitely see a color differentiation.
And these, once the plants start growing in this bed, they'll be shaded by the leaves of the plants.
Yeah, exactly.
Which makes it fun, because then you kind of have to hunt around your plants. You have to be attentive with your gardens and hunt around, because a wine cap mushroom will come out of the ground overnight and be almost too big by the next day. It's really fast when they are growing in a happy place. So you get to kind of be very intimate with your garden and knowing all the things that are happening, walking through it every day. It helps in general. So for planting, what I do generally is I come to this medium that we've inoculated, and I'll open up a hole all the way down to that compost layer. And then we'll plant, let's see, where'd the seeds start? Oh, behind her. You're good. Okay. There we go. They're still really fragile seedlings.
Yeah, they're pretty good.
My mic's going all over the place. Okay. So, I'll put a little soil in. I'll put our seedling in. A little more soil. Or you could just put some soil in here and drop a seed in. And you water it, and that's it. And that'll grow. That's what they like. So I'll just go around and anywhere. What starts happening, which I really have been having fun with, is now basically you have a blank page and you can draw your plants however you want in there. So you can I've been making labyrinths or trails or whatever. You're not confined to like trying to make simple rows and stuff. You can just, wherever you want to put a hole and drop plants in, you can. All this beautiful corn. Thank you. I might need help getting these out.
So you put the corn pretty close together.
Yeah, it might have been a little too close. We can stretch it out a bit more. One thing I really love doing here is, we're doing corn here. That's one of my favorite things to do in these, but you can grow anything. And it's really set up well for transplants. You can obviously plant seeds in here too, but one thing that happens is as the season starts getting late for planting, you go around all those plant stores and things start going on sale. If you have a bio bed ready, you can just drop as many transplants as you want and they grow huge. So it's pretty fun to do. So we'll come back and put bean seeds in with the corn. And we'll probably put some squash in here towards the middle of each section.
Bean right in the same hole.
Yeah, so it comes in the same.
And what about the squash?
Squash, I usually do just a few plants in the middle. The squash ends up getting really unruly. So you kind of got to decide, how much squash you want and how much impact. Sometimes I'll just do areas of just corn. You don't have to do Three Sisters. You could do this with just corn. I've actually found that doing this method helps the wine caps grow too. They like the interaction with the soil, and the columns of soil kind of help the sawdust get moisture more easily. Like I was saying, I built one of these all out of wild rice hulls. We had pigs in the area, and I gave them wild rice hulls as bedding. And then, as they got older and moved on, I made the space into a garden bed, and I mulched it with wild rice. And then this year, on top of all of that, I built a bed out of wild rice hulls that I'd saved last year from the wild rice house. And now, every fall, my plan is to get the wild rice hulls in the fall and put the beds away that way.
So are you getting the wild rice hulls from other producers, or what? Or it's just what you...
It's from we have a wild rice processor in town here, the Finland Wild Rice House. Mm-hmm. And so they always have a little bit extra, and they've always been kind to me and let me have a little. So this is sort of an experiment. We don't know if it'll work. I don't know if wine cap mushroom wild rice hulls are compatible. So we'll see. As far as I know, no one's tried. And that's the thing really, is no matter where you are, there's some sort of waste like that.
Yeah.
That someone's currently paying to get rid of. And if you say, hey, you can bring me as much as you want and you don't have to pay me anything, they'll do it. Should we put the squash in a bed in the very center of the whole section?
Yeah, like the center of this quadrant.
It's okay to walk on this stuff too. You're not going to compress this much. This is a type of squash I developed, and I called it Silver Hill squash, and because it came out of the compost pile at the OCA office, and we've been keeping it for about 8 years now, and it is really good, really hardy. We just ate the last one, so it lasts all winter long. Super tasty, grows prolifically. Hopefully that happens this year. Yeah.
Yep, some years I've kind of done the corn, and instead of doing the large vining squash, I put in a few more plants, but actually did more of the bushing squash, and like zucchinis or other types of summer squash. So you can vary it. It's you get the same effect. You just need a few extra plants because they don't ramble all over the place.
It's probably a much more manageable way to do it.
Yeah, or like in this type of, you've got 4 beds. You can do 2 of them with the rambles, 2 of them with the zucchini summer squash. So you can experiment.
Yeah.
The idea with the squash is really that it helps to kind of just cover the ground and shade and keep the ground cooler.
Exactly.
And that's its role in this little companion planting.
Now all we're doing is just continuing what we've already done. Just filling it out. We're going to do the same thing for all of these. And like I said, you don't have to plant corn. You can do almost anything this way. Just put starts in, put seeds in. I've got lettuce growing in this method. I've got radishes growing in this method. I've got cauliflower and cabbage and rutabagas and cilantro and parsley. What else do I got? Rosemary. I got a rosemary bush growing out in a bed like this. Isn't that cool?
For winter? No.
No. I just put it out this year. So it's kind of, I call it like a plug and play garden. You just can put anything in you want.
You could market that one. Plug and play. Yeah, okay. So any final thoughts or directions? I think people have really kind of gotten the idea of what we're doing, seeing the planting, and
anyone who tries this, please try this and let us know what you learn. Tell us if it works, if it doesn't work, what you tried differently. I mean, that's the idea, is doing these experiments. I've sort of shied away from talking about this for the last 5 years because I kind of wanted to make sure it was actually working and not just a fluke. But I'm fairly confident that it seems replicable. I've got several other farms doing it. There's a lot of other people working with wine cap mushrooms and all sorts of cool things you can do with it. So yeah, tell us what you found useful and what you experienced.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Corey, and thank you, everybody.
Thanks.
Thank you for the mycelium, too.
Yeah, exactly. The whole community.
The whole thriving community.
All right.
Take care, everyone out there.